Hey guys, tonight we're crashing a party. A really old one. Imagine trudging through the frozen wilderness, the crunch of snow underfoot, the sky painted with flickers of the aurora, and the low hum of distant drums vibrating in your chest like a second heartbeat. You crest a hill and see it, torchlight dancing against the snow, rising smoke curling into the night sky, and voices, deep, booming, slurred voices. Welcome to a Viking feast. You probably won't survive this, but hey, you'll have a story to tell in Valhalla. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And don't forget to comment with your location and what time it is where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You approach the Longhouse slowly, half excited, half frozen. Thick pine logs rise like ribs from the snowy ground, lashed together with iron nails and mossy chinking. This place wasn't built for charm. It was built to last through winters that could kill you in your sleep. The wooden slats groan in the wind, and somewhere behind the thick, fur-draped door, a burst of raucous laughter escapes, like a pressure valve hissing open. Someone just told a very dirty joke, or lost a bet. Two torchbearers stand at the threshold. One eyes you up and down. You're not exactly dressed for 10th century Scandinavia, but neither was that Byzantine guy last week. The torchbearer grunts, lifts the curtain, and you're bathed in heat and the chaotic roar of celebration. It smells like smoke, sweat, wet wool, roasted meat, and a suspicious amount of turnips. You duck your head and enter. The Longhouse is a universe of its own. A central fire pit runs nearly the length of the building, glowing with orange coals and flickering flames. Wood smoke curls up into a hole in the roof, barely enough to keep the air breathable. Benches line both sides, packed shoulder to shoulder with burly men, sharp-eyed women, sticky-fingered children, and one elderly man who appears to be asleep on a dog. Or possibly the other way around. The walls are hung with furs and shields. Carved wooden beams twist with Norse knotwork. Dragons swallowing their own tails, wolves mid-snarl, and runes that seem to shimmer if you stare too long. Every inch feels heavy with history and danger, like you're inside a living thing that might, at any moment, decide it doesn't like you. Someone shoves a horn into your hand. Mead, sweet, thick, spiced mead. It tastes like honey and regret. You drink to be polite, then realize not drinking would have been worse. This is how they size you up, not just by how much you can hold, but how you hold it. Did you spill? Did you wince? Did you hesitate? One mistake, and the guy 3 benches down might challenge you to a headbutting contest. And that guy's wearing a helmet. You shuffle down the hall, past clusters of warriors, slapping each other's backs so hard it counts as chiropractic care. One is showing off a scar that runs from eyebrow to collarbone. Another's pouring his drink directly into his beard, apparently for storage. You find an empty space at the edge of the hall, just close enough to the fire to feel your toes again, but far enough to avoid incoming mutton bones flung in jest. Then the door slams behind you, and everyone cheers. The Jarl has arrived. You don't need a formal introduction. He's the biggest man in the room by 2 shoulders, wears a cloak of wolf pelts, and has a beard that looks like it could strangle you without permission. He strides in like the hero of a saga, and maybe he is. Or maybe he just says he is, which in Viking society is basically the same thing. He doesn't speak immediately. Instead, he lifts a massive horn carved with silver spirals, and everyone watches. You do too. partly because it feels like the respectful thing to do, and partly because if you don't, someone might notice and throw you into the pigpen out back. He bellows a toast in Old Norse, which you do not understand, but everyone else does, because they slam their fists on the tables in approval. Then the noise returns, louder than before. The Jarl has officially opened the feast. Let's talk about what this place really is. Yes, it's a dinner. Yes, it's a party. But it's also a court, a marketplace, a political summit, and sometimes a battlefield, social or literal. In Viking culture, the Longhouse wasn't just a place to eat. It was a stage for power, a test of loyalty, a forge for reputation. And you? You're just the weird guest who no one's quite sure how to interpret. Yet, a man beside you offers a strip of dried fish, and you take it, because you are not stupid. It's salty and tough, like chewing on a barnacle-flavored shoe, but you nod approvingly. He grins and introduces himself with a name that has 6 consonants and no vowels. You nod again. Just pretend you heard it right. He starts talking, loudly, about the time he killed a bear with a soup ladle. You're 90% sure he's exaggerating, but also 10% sure he's not. Historically, Viking feasts weren't as frequent as we imagine. They happened during seasonal festivals, successful raids, weddings, funerals, or in this case, probably just because the Jarl felt generous or drunk. Archaeological digs in places like Borg and Tisha have unearthed longhouses with massive hearths and layers of animal bones, confirming that when they did party, they did it full scale. One layer of ash at Lejra shows evidence of repeated burnings, probably from feasts gone a little too well. As your eyes adjust, you realize that every person here has a role. There's the Skald at the far end of the hall, quietly tuning a harp made from antler and sinew. A child crawls under the table in search of dropped bread. 2 women exchange smirks over something a man just said. He notices and suddenly looks deeply insecure. And the slaves, thralls, move silently, efficiently, never pausing. They carry platters, refill horns, and brush ashes from the floor. No one thanks them, but everyone notices when they're not fast enough. You watch as a guest from another clan arrives, escorted in by a man with braids down to his waist. They greet each other with hand clasps and shoulder thumps that sound like someone slapping a roast. There's tension in the air. They smile, but the smiles are sharp. Historians still argue whether these feasts served more as diplomatic tools or social pressure cookers. Some think they were a way to solidify bonds and ensure loyalty to the Jarl. Others think they were a giant performance, like medieval TED Talks, but with more axes and fewer slides. Likely it was both. Tonight, for example, you notice the Jarl's men sitting closer than usual to the fire, their hands a little too near their weapons. Something's brewing, and that's when you hear it. A sudden silence, then a deep thrum of a drum. The signal. The official first toast is coming. This one, to Odin. Always Odin. Everyone rises. Even the drunkest man in the room finds his feet. You do too. When in Scandinavia, the Jarl speaks again, slowly this time, and though you don't catch every word, the tone is clear. This is not optional. He raises his horn high, and the others follow. You mirror them. The firelight catches in the mead, turning it to gold. They drink. So do you. It burns. Or maybe that's just fear. The noise returns, and the feast begins in full. You glance around, wondering how long this will last. The answer? Longer than you think. You're still blinking smoke out of your eyes when the next wave of reality hits you. This isn't just a drunken free-for-all. though yes, it is also that. There's a deeply structured social choreography playing out across the Longhouse, like a very loud, slightly tipsy ballet. You realize quickly where you sit, who you nod to, how many words you speak. These things all matter. The Longhouse is like a living diagram of Viking status. Closest to the hearth, warmest and brightest, are the elites, chiefs, jarls, seasoned warriors with enough scars to prove they've earned their seat. Further out, it gets colder, smokier, darker. There's you. And beside you, that guy who's been gnawing on a bone for 20 minutes and hasn't blinked once. Everyone in here knows their rank. It's not written down anywhere. It doesn't need to be. It's in the cut of their cloak, the intricacy of their brooches, the weight of their arm rings. One man nearby has a belt buckle shaped like Thor's hammer, and it's so large it might actually function as one. Another boasts a necklace strung with human teeth, hopefully symbolic, but you wouldn't bet on it. The Jarl, of course, reigns supreme. Think of him as part mafia boss, part CEO, part motivational speaker. He's not just rich, he's generous and ruthless, which in Viking culture is basically the recipe for success. He maintains loyalty through gift-giving, land promises, and shared mead. But step out of line, and you're just as likely to find yourself exiled, or beheaded, or exiled and then beheaded, which feels redundant but very on brand for this crowd. To his right sits his wife, cloaked in dark blue, her hair coiled in intricate braids pinned with bronze. She speaks quietly, but when she does, people lean in. Viking women of high status held more influence than many of their European counterparts. They could own property, demand divorces, even run households while husbands were away looting other people's silverware. You notice a ring of older women sitting together further down. These are likely the Valor Seeresses. You'll hear more from them later, but even now, you feel their eyes on you. Cool, calculating, as if they're already predicting the kind of death you'll have. Spoiler, it probably involves wolves. Then there's the warriors, broad-shouldered, sun-weathered, and far too comfortable with weapon proximity. Some lean on axes taller than you are. Others clink the rim of their horns against the hilts of their swords, like some kind of inside joke. They sit in clusters, usually by clan or loyalty. You can feel the undercurrent of rivalry. One man with facial tattoos nods across the fire to another, who returns it with a half-smile that could easily turn into a duel if the mead flows fast enough. And speaking of flow, mead is being poured in reckless abundance. Slaves, mostly young, some looking barely older than children, dash between benches, refilling horns, replacing trenchers, and ducking under drunken arms with practiced agility. You catch the eye of one girl, and she gives you the briefest smile, a flicker of shared bewilderment before she disappears into the crowd again. Near the back of the hall, away from the firelight, the lower status guests cluster. These are the laborers, farmers, fishermen. Their clothes are rough spun, their hands calloused. But even here, there's hierarchy. That man with the sea wind complexion and 50-year-old glare, he probably owns 3 ships and a coastline. That younger guy nervously fixing his tunic, he's probably hoping to marry the Jarl's niece, or at least not accidentally insult anyone. The feast isn't just for eating, it's for being seen, being remembered. Viking society was oral. Your reputation was your resume, your legacy, and your currency all rolled into one. If someone recited a poem about your deeds, congratulations, you were immortal. If no one spoke your name after death, you were basically deleted from the Norse version of the cloud. Historians still argue whether these seating arrangements were strictly enforced or more fluid depending on the occasion. Some think they were rigid, tied to land ownership or bloodlines. Others argue they were more performative, changeable depending on who'd brought the biggest gift or told the best saga that month. Either way, you're very aware you're not in the inner circle. Not yet. A sudden voice cuts across the room, a Skald standing now, tuning his lyre. But more on him later. For now, your attention is drawn to a man weaving through the crowd with exaggerated swagger. He wears red, dyed fabric, a rare luxury, and his beard is oiled into a point that looks dangerously flammable. He's talking too loudly, laughing too quickly, gesturing at people who are clearly not listening. And yet, no one stops him. No one throws him out. Why? Because he's the Jarl's cousin, or brother-in-law, or maybe just someone with good blackmail material. Viking society might value strength, but it tolerates nuisance, especially if that nuisance is family. You begin to notice how everyone watches everyone. Every chuckle is measured. Every nod is calculated. No one is truly relaxed, not even the drunkest. The feast is a game, and you're still learning the rules. A loud cheer erupts from one bench, where a man slams his horn down and declares he has finally matched his father's drink record. Two others lift him onto their shoulders in triumph. Meanwhile, a third man immediately vomits into a bucket and is dragged outside with the casual efficiency of someone who's done this before. No one bats an eye. You can't help but smile. For all the intensity, there's warmth here too. This isn't some solemn religious ritual. It's messy, human, and alive. Children squeal as they chase a half-plucked chicken between the tables. A dog limps in, steals a fish, and limps back out. A woman scolds her husband for slurping his broth too loudly, and he scowls like a chastised child. But always, always, eyes flick back toward the fire, toward the Jarl, toward the people who matter. At one point, someone leans toward you. He has one eye clouded with cataract and a gold ring on every finger. He whispers, "Best advice. Laugh at the Jarl's jokes, even if you don't get them." Then he winks with the good eye and vanishes into the crowd. Possibly a ghost, possibly just the village weirdo. And then, unexpectedly, the Jarl does laugh. Something about a trader from Hedeby mistaking a seal for a monk. The whole room explodes in laughter. You do too, just a half-second delayed. The Jarl looks your way, just briefly, but enough. You were seen. You were part of the joke. That matters. You sip your mead again, more confidently now. You're learning, adapting, sitting straighter, watching more closely. You notice how the oldest warriors grip their drinking horns with hands still used to sword hilts. You see how one young woman by the fire moves through groups like a diplomat, her presence softening tension wherever it pools. Even here, among the frostbitten and flame-bathed, the quiet power isn't always where you expect it. You lean back slightly and take it all in. The layers of status, rivalry, camaraderie. The way tradition holds the room like a net. The hierarchy doesn't feel oppressive. It feels necessary. In a world this brutal, knowing your place might just be the thing that keeps you alive. But don't get too comfortable. The Skald is standing again. And it's almost time for the first story. The Skald strums once, lazily, like he's plucking tension straight out of the air. The room hushes, instantly. It's not the silence of fear, but of reverence. Even the warriors, mid-belch or mid-argument, quiet down. Eyes turn toward the man now standing near the fire pit, framed in flickering gold. His cloak is mottled gray like storm clouds, and his beard is braided with tiny beads that shimmer like frost. The lyre hums again, a few soft, ascending notes that make your spine tingle. And then he speaks. It's not just words, it's spell casting. You don't understand all the old Norse phrases as they roll off his tongue, but you don't need to. His tone rises and falls like a wave about to break, pauses like thunder just before the crack. He has the voice of someone who's seen too many winters and turned them all into poetry. He's telling a saga, a long one, the tale of Egil the Black-Toothed, a warrior so fierce he once bit through a helmet mid-battle and shattered the skull underneath. Gross. Impressive. There's blood, betrayal, prophecy, and, of course, a duel on a cliff during a thunderstorm. Because Vikings do love their dramatic backdrops, you're drawn in, completely. The rhythm of the words is hypnotic. You can feel the emotions in the crowd shifting with the story. Gasps during betrayals, laughter at crude jests, the quiet inhale when Egil is finally betrayed by his closest friend. Stabbed not in battle, but while bathing. Naked treachery, quite literally. The fire pops and sparks, the shadows dance along the rafters, and you sit motionless, mead forgotten. This is the true heart of the feast. Not the food, not the ale, not even the jarl, but the saga. Because here, in this hall lit by fire and fat, stories are survival. You start to realize just how central these sagas are to Viking culture. They aren't just entertainment, they're blueprints for life. Stories of valor and vengeance, of loyalty and loss. They guide behavior, set standards. In a world without laws carved in marble, you carve them in memory instead. And while historians still argue whether these tales were always historically accurate or just elaborate fiction, the Vikings didn't seem to care. To them, truth wasn't in the dates. It was in the feeling. Did the story stir your blood? Did it make your skin prickle, your fists clench? If yes, it was true enough. The Skald finishes with a flourish of strings, and the hall erupts in cheers. Not clapping, Vikings didn't really clap, but pounding fists, boot stomps, whoops that echo off the wooden beams. It's thunderous, a wild kind of appreciation. You glance toward the Jarl. He nods slightly. He was moved, too. Then another Skald stands up. Younger, leaner, his beard only half-grown and full of nervous energy. He's clearly next in the queue. There's a tension now. Can he follow that performance? He strums, too fast, starts, misses a beat. You wince in sympathy. But then, he shifts. He tells a funny tale, not grand or tragic, but bawdy and strange, about a drunken fisherman who accidentally married a troll woman and only realized it when she beat him at every wrestling match. The hall howls with laughter. Even the old warrior beside you, who hasn't blinked in an hour, grins through his beard. And just like that, the Skald earns his place. This is the other side of Viking storytelling. Not just glory, but humor. They adored it. Poets could roast kings and survive it. Sometimes. One famous Skald once compared a chieftain's beard to wet moss caught on a dead seal, and lived to recite 3 more sagas. Barely. You're watching oral tradition in motion. And here's something quirky. Skalds often used kennings, poetic metaphors that sound like riddles. A sea becomes a whale road. Blood, that's battle sweat. A sword is a wound hoe. It's like describing your car as a metal horse of speed. Weirdly elegant. The next Skald, older again, sings a drapa, a formal praise poem for the Jarl. This one is rehearsed, rhythmic, structured, clearly expected. It's less a performance and more a currency exchange. Here's my poetry, now here's your gift. And sure enough, when he finishes, the Jarl signals a servant who brings the poet a cloak. Soft wool, embroidered, payment delivered. This, too, is Viking economy. Not silver, not barley, but fame. If your name is sung in someone else's hall, you matter. If your deeds are turned into verse, you're immortal. If your saga survives the winter, so do you. A hush falls again. Something's changing. You notice the Seeress, one of the Valor, rising slowly from her place. She carries no lyre, no mead horn, just a staff carved with symbols that seem to shimmer even in the dim firelight. Now this isn't a saga. It's not entertainment. It's prophecy. Her voice is different. Lower. Chant-like. Less performance. More invocation. And you realize this isn't for you. This isn't even really for the crowd. It's for something else. Something ancient. She calls on the Norns, the Fates, speaks of a coming winter longer than usual, of one-eyed travelers, of blood at sea, of a girl with frost in her hair and vengeance in her name. Charming. Some people bow their heads, others look away. A few, mostly the very old or very drunk, mutter under their breath. You're not sure if it's theater or real magic, but you wouldn't bet your soul either way. Later, one of the older warriors leans in and murmurs, "The Volva's always right. Just sometimes she's early." Then he takes another bite of what might be goat and pretends nothing happened. You breathe deeply. The fire crackles. Another Skald stands. Another saga begins. This one is a tale of forbidden love between a blacksmith and a shield maiden. It ends, predictably, in fire, exile, and the blacksmith becoming a bear. Symbolically? Literally? No one seems sure. But it moves you. You feel something stir in your chest. A pang of longing, perhaps. You don't even like blacksmiths, normally. You laugh at yourself. These stories, they work. They slip past your defenses. They burrow into your memory. Already, you're trying to remember the names, the metaphors, the rhythms. The Longhouse isn't just filled with people. It's filled with echoes. And when the fire dies, and the embers glow low, and the Jarl yawns behind his gold-rimmed cup, you know the sagas will continue. Whispered in dreams, recited in frost, carved into bone. You've sat among them, listened with them, laughed with them. Maybe, just maybe, one day, someone will sing of you. You're still blinking away the final flickers of that saga, your brain swirling with bear-transformed blacksmiths and shield maidens who can punch through chainmail when the smell hits you. Again. Only this time, it's stronger, richer. There's something new in the air now, cutting through the smoke and sweat and spilled mead like a hot knife through whale fat. It's meat, but not just any meat. Roasted, dripping, glistening meat, charred on the outside, tender within. Someone somewhere near the Firepit has just unveiled a fresh batch of venison, maybe boar. The scent crawls into your nostrils, grabs hold of your soul, and announces in no uncertain terms, you're about to eat something that once ran, grunted, or gored a farmer. The feasting begins in earnest now. Before, it was nibbling, flirting with hunger. This is the main event. A parade of platters moves through the hall. Wooden trenchers piled with cuts so fresh they probably still remember the forest. Boiled onions, porridge thick enough to plaster a shield, flatbread charred in places, and, wait for it, fermented shark. Yes, fermented shark, or something very similar. Because Vikings had a knack for, well, let's call it aggressive preservation. In Iceland, for instance, the meat of the Greenland shark was buried, rotted slightly, then hung to dry for months. It smells like ammonia and sadness. But hey, winter's long and flavor's optional. A slave slams down a trencher in front of you. On it is a slab of what might be pork, or bear that's been dressed up as pork. Either way, it's steaming, and your stomach votes yes before your brain can register concerns. You tear in. There are no forks here, no knives, unless you've brought your own, which of course, everyone has. Eating is done with fingers, teeth, and an attitude. It's primal, messy, and deeply satisfying. And you're not alone in that joy. Across from you, a boy no older than 12 gnaws a rib clean, tosses the bone over his shoulder, and grabs a second before anyone can stop him. Further down, 2 men compete to see who can finish a smoked trout fastest. One wins by swallowing it whole, eyeballs and all. This is more than just a meal, it's a performance. Vikings used these feasts to show off wealth, generosity, endurance. Got a bigger boar than last year? Brag. Can finish a whole leg of lamb without pausing? Cheers. Can make a stew from leftover fish bits and still get compliments? Congratulations, you're this year's culinary warlord. And of course, the Jarl sets the tone. His personal trencher is a marvel of overkill. Roast goose, butter-drenched turnips, what looks like pickled herring pie. He doesn't just eat, he feeds. He calls over favored warriors and hands them cuts of meat like blessings. It's symbolic. By feeding his people, he binds them. You don't betray the man who gave you honey-glazed duck midwinter. And you notice something else. Even the way people chew seems to indicate status. Those closer to the Jarl, deliberate, refined, even if their fingers are dripping grease. Those in the shadows, fast, nervous, hungry, not just for food, but for proximity. This hall is a ladder, and every bite might be a rung. You sip from your horn. It's not mead this time. It's sati, a kind of farmhouse ale brewed with juniper berries and yeast scraped from who knows where. It's earthy, thick, slightly sour, and surprisingly drinkable. Then comes a bowl of groat, porridge. Not the breakfast kind. This is combat porridge. Barley, chunks of lard, sometimes blood, flavored with herbs, and the occasional acorn. Vikings ate what the land gave them, and if the land gave them bark that week, congrats, you're eating bark. You dip a hunk of bread into the grot. It disintegrates. You eat it anyway. A woman beside you offers a bowl of what she calls skyr, a sort of proto-yogurt. It's tangy and soft, with a spoon made from horn. You thank her and take a bite. She watches you closely, too closely. You nod in approval. She nods back. Congratulations, you may now be betrothed. Or you've just complimented her grandmother's curdling method. Either way, things just got serious. As the eating continues, you realize something subtle is happening. Stories are being told again. Not by the Skalds, but by everyone. Food and saga go hand in hand. The Jarl's champion describes a hunt where he wrestled a boar and broke its spine with his knees. Doubtful, but no one questions it. Another man boasts that he once drank 4 horns of mead, then beat a Dane in arm wrestling, then sailed home naked during a storm. These stories are flexible, elastic. There's always a bit of truth, and a healthy glob of exaggeration. You join in, timidly. You mention a storm you once saw, A boat almost flipped. A fish you might have caught. They listen, laugh, nod. You're in. Not fully, but you're warming up. Mainstream fact break. Historians know that Viking meals at big gatherings were extravagant affairs, often including imported foods like walnuts, spices, and even wine, if the host could afford it. Excavations at wealthy farms have revealed bones of exotic animals, spices from as far as Byzantium, and ceramic bowls from the Middle East. And yet, much of the diet remained rooted in the harsh realities of the North. Dried cod, boiled root vegetables, milk curdled into cheese. Rich or poor, feast or famine, the Vikings rarely wasted a thing. Even fish heads became broth. Even bones became knives. One quirky tidbit, some Viking recipes included birch ash, yes, literal tree ash, as a seasoning. It added a slight smokiness and helped preserve meats. Tastes like campfire, feels like eating a twig. But hey, it's natural. You look down at your trencher. All that's left is a smear of grease and a fish spine. You've eaten more than you thought possible. Your fingers are slick, your face flushed, your belly full. But the feast isn't over. Not even close. Now come the challenges. The Jarl rises slowly, signaling the next phase of the night. This is where pride sharpens into competition, where food and drink fuel contests of strength, wit, and constitution. Someone belches loud enough to shake dust from the rafters. Another man stands and announces he can drink 3 full horns without falling over. A third interrupts to say he'll drink those 3, then wrestle a berserker, then compose a poem with his foot in a bucket of eels. You have officially entered the Viking version of a talent show. Except here, the loser might lose a tooth. You lean back, wiping your hands on your tunic. Around you, the hall begins to shift. Louder now, less structured, a touch more wild. Meat turns to challenge. Ale turns to dares. Words become weapons. The fire blazes. Your stomach groans. And the night, somehow, is just beginning. Things are getting rowdy. And that's putting it kindly. You're no longer sitting in a hall where stories are gently sung and food is neatly torn apart with communal joy. No, friend, you are now deep in the belly of Viking chaos. The kind that starts with a hearty laugh and ends with someone trying to headbutt a support beam. It begins innocently. A young warrior, bare-chested now, his tunic tied around his head like a bizarre party crown, staggers into the center of the hall, arms raised, mead sloshing from his horn. He shouts, "I challenge anyone, to an alliteration battle." The room cheers. Someone throws a bone. Another yells, "Start with F or forfeit." And then it begins. 2 men square off, flinging poetic insults at each other, each line beginning with the same letter. It's part game, part performance art, part fight foreplay. You hear phrases like foul-faced fool fondler and fish-brained fence hopper, which, in Viking society, might be the equivalent of a rap battle wrapped in Shakespeare. The loser? He runs out of words, stumbles on a rhyme, or, quite literally, falls over. Victory goes to the man still upright and sharp-tongued. The crowd roars, and the next challenge begins. This is no accident. In Viking culture, insults were serious business. There was a whole tradition called flyting, a formal exchange of poetic taunts, often laced with accusations of cowardice, sorcery, or scandalous behavior with goats. It wasn't just for fun. Lose one of these, and your honor could take a hit. You spot an older man warming up for his turn, lips pursed, eyes scanning the hall for his next victim. He's a veteran. You can tell. He's got that glint of dangerous wit. the kind that probably got him banned from 3 settlements and invited back to 4. Then it shifts from wordplay to strength. 2 men step forward, bare arms gleaming with sweat and mead, and slam their fists together like a signal. They lock hands, and the crowd instantly circles them. No introductions, no rules. It's a grip test. The goal? Squeeze until the other man submits, or something breaks. You hear tendons creak. Feet dig into the dirt floor. A woman nearby screams, "Break his thumb!" But it's not clear if she means it lovingly. Eventually, the smaller man buckles. He slumps, holding his wrist, grinning through the pain. The winner roars like a bear that's just eaten another, slightly smaller bear. Someone shoves a horn of mead in his face. He drinks it sideways. And now the challenges are rolling in fast. A man announces he will hold his breath until someone else drops unconscious. This seems medically questionable. Another insists he can swallow an entire eel in one go. The eel disagrees, but it's not consulted. Someone begins juggling skulls, actual skulls, while standing on one leg. It's unclear whether he's skilled or just lucky, but the effect is hypnotic. Meanwhile, a girl no taller than your shoulder challenges a towering berserker to a wrestling match. People laugh. Then she wins. In 30 seconds, the hall goes berserk. She winks at you as she walks past. You suddenly question every life choice you've ever made. And through it all, the Jarl watches. Not with concern, but with delight. He isn't just permitting this, he expects it. These contests serve a purpose. They display who's strong, who's clever, who can laugh at themselves without losing face. It's Viking meritocracy, booze-fueled and dirt-stained. And you're beginning to understand something important. This chaos, it's structured. It's ritualized. It means something. Historians still argue whether these kinds of games were common at every feast or reserved for special seasonal gatherings, like Yule or blot ceremonies. But what's certain is that Viking society prized public tests of endurance and wit, especially when the ale flowed freely and the gods might be listening. Ah yes, the gods. In the middle of a particularly wild contest, where 2 men try to outdo each other by biting roasted bones into shapes of their favorite longships, a priest of Thor stands up and slams a staff on the ground. The hall hushes. Again. He raises his horn and offers a toast, not to a man, but to Thor himself, protector of mankind, friend of farmers, lover of goats. The toast is loud, solemn, and strangely moving. Everyone raises their horns and shouts in unison, "Till Valhall!" To Valhalla. Then they chug. No sips, no polite swirls, just open throats and cascading mead. It spills, it splashes, it baptizes tunics. One man wipes his mouth with his braid. Another doesn't wipe at all. You try to keep up, and immediately regret it. Mead, it turns out, is tricky. Especially Viking mead, which can be thick as syrup and strong enough to knock out a small horse. One minute you're warm and smiling. The next, the fire is melting and you're debating whether your fingers are real. And the singing. Oh gods, the singing. It starts with one voice, deep, broken, tuneless. Then another joins, and another. Soon, the whole hall is belting a song that sounds vaguely like a hymn to Odin, but contains suspiciously many lines about flatulence and falling off longships. You try to follow the lyrics, but they morph mid-verse. New lines are added, rhymes are butchered. It becomes a kind of musical wrestling match. You give up and hum, loudly. Then someone starts dancing. Not gracefully. No one is spinning in circles or performing elegant footwork. This is full body, stomping, shoulder waving, hair whipping movement. 2 warriors grab shields and slap them in time to the beat. A third uses a fish carcass as a tambourine. It shouldn't work, but it does. It's beautiful, in its own chaotic, mead-drenched way. And amidst the revelry, someone pulls you up. Before you can protest, you're on your feet. You're dancing. Badly. The crowd cheers anyway. You're offered another horn. You take it. It's either mead or horse milk. You drink it. It's both. Your face says help. The hall says more. You start to lose track of time, of names, of what century this is. But you're not alone. Around you, others are sliding into that soft, warm haze where laughter comes easy and memories become myths. You see someone proposing a duel of belching. Another man serenades his sheep. She seems unimpressed. One quirky fact? Some Viking feasts included mock marriages, silly, drunken weddings between guests, meant to mimic alliances or poke fun at politics. The bride might be a burly fisherman. The groom could be a goat. No one questions it. It's all part of the night. You're not sure if you're in one now. Someone just tossed a veil over your head. You smile and wave. That seems to satisfy the crowd. Eventually, someone does fall through a bench. Another man collapses face first into a barrel of onions. A dog runs by wearing someone's boot. The dancing continues. But amid the madness, you realize something. You feel safe. Strange, considering the axes, the shouting, the eel-swallowing competition. But it's true. There's a rhythm here, a pattern, a place for everyone, even you. You slump back onto your bench, sweat-soaked, mead-soaked, possibly soul-soaked. Around you, the hall pulses like a living thing, breathing, singing, devouring the night. The contest's slow, the songs mellow. Laughter gives way to humming. Someone lies down on a bearskin rug and sighs, "Wake me when Ragnarok begins." You're tempted to do the same, but something else is coming. A new kind of challenge. One that requires no strength, no poetry. Just silence. A test of the spirit. You blink slowly and wait. You're not sure how long you've been blinking, but when you finally open your eyes again, really open them, the feast has shifted. The chaos is still there, but it's softened, like the volume's been turned down without anyone noticing. Fires burn lower. The air is warmer, thicker. The games are fewer, and most of the warriors are now sprawled in various states of peaceful ruin, slumped against wooden beams, curled under fur pelts, or simply face down on the floor, snoring into half-chewed bones. It's quieter, not silent, just reverent. And then you notice, the Jarl is rising, not leaping to his feet with a shout, not slamming his drinking horn on the table, just standing, calm, purposeful. Everyone sees it, even the guy sleeping on a goose. Heads turn, backs straighten. A subtle wave of attention rolls through the hall like a silent wind. You sit up too. Because this is what you've been waiting for, even if you didn't know it. The Jarl's voice cuts through the mead fog like a horn through fog. Deep, resonant, smooth like river stone. Bring the seer. And suddenly, the tone changes. 2 young warriors step away from the wall and disappear behind a hanging fur curtain. The rest of the crowd waits, hushed, eyes glittering with something between excitement and caution. A minute later, she appears. The vulva. She walks like time itself, slow, steady, not old, but ancient. Her robes are patchworks of wool and feathers, dyed in dark reds and seaweed greens. Around her waist, a belt of bones. In her hands, a tall carved staff, topped with a bundle of raven feathers, bits of metal, and what might be a human tooth. You try not to stare. You fail. Everyone rises slightly, not standing fully, but sitting straighter, heads lowered. There's a respect here that borders on fear, and you get it. Because she looks like she sees through you, like she already knows the things you try not to think about, the regret you pretend not to carry, the dreams you won't admit you have. She seats herself at the center of the hall, right before the fire. A drum is placed beside her, nothing flashy, just a taut skin stretched over a wooden frame. She begins to tap it, slow and rhythmic. Boom, boom, boom. It's not loud, but it feels loud. The sound gets into your chest, your ribs, the softest parts of you. It's like your body is remembering something your mind hasn't learned yet. Then she starts to speak. But she doesn't just speak. She chants. It's a strange, lilting voice, somewhere between song and whisper. You can't catch every word. Some are in Old Norse, others in something deeper. But the effect is immediate. The entire hall leans in, drawn toward her voice like moths to a flame. She speaks of rivers that run backward, of wolves with golden eyes, of ships made from fingernails, of lovers lost across stormy seas and gods who weep stone tears. It's not a story. It's many stories. It's the past, the future, the if. Some sound real, some sound like dreams, but no one questions them. No one laughs. In Viking society, the vulva was a powerful figure, a seeress, a prophet, a kind of spiritual anchor. She wasn't always welcome, but she was always respected. Her words could sway leaders. Her visions could determine when to sail, when to raid, when to pray. Historians still argue whether vulvas were connected more to the Norse gods or to older, pre-Viking earth spirits. Some suggest they practiced a kind of trance magic called seeder, believed to allow journeys between worlds, communication with spirits, even the weaving of fate itself. You can believe it. Right now, you'd believe anything. The drumming grows faster. Her voice rises. She's not looking at anyone, but she's seeing everyone. It's unnerving, beautiful. You blink again, and the fire seems to dance with her movements, twisting in unnatural ways, casting shadows that don't quite behave. Then the room tilts. No, you tilt. Or maybe the line between what's real and what's story has just completely given up. You close your eyes for a second, and you're somewhere else. You're standing on the edge of a cliff, wind howling around you. You're in a storm at sea, holding onto the mast as lightning paints the waves silver. You're walking through a field of bones, while a black horse watches from the hill. And then, you're back. Just like that, the vulva stops. No drum, no final word. Just silence. Then she slowly stands, staff clicking on the floor, and walks away. No applause, no cheers. Just a long breath from the crowd, like everyone forgot how to exhale. Even the Jarl sits with a new stillness, head bowed, fingers steepled before him. A moment later, he nods to the musician at the corner, and a soft lyre begins to play. Not festive, not mournful, just thoughtful. You sit back, not sure what just happened, but something did. And now, with the seer's words still echoing in the timbered bones of the hall, the feast begins to enter its final stage. Reflection. A woman near you turns to her brother and tells him a quiet story about their father. A warrior sharpens his axe and murmurs a song to no one. Even the dogs seem calmer. It's as if the hall has remembered that tomorrow exists. Because Viking life was never just raids and revelry. It was also mourning, anticipation, preparation. These feasts were more than parties. They were anchors in a dangerous world where winter could kill you, gods could smite you, and your neighbor might turn rival with a single bad harvest. That's why the feasts had space for poetry, for riddles, for prophecy, for everything that kept the soul sharp. And here's a quirky fact. Some Viking sagas mention people weeping during feasts, not out of sorrow, but from the sheer beauty of a poem or song. Imagine being so moved by words that your ale goes salty. You get it now. You feel it now. Someone passes you a bowl of something warm. Maybe porridge, maybe onions, maybe both. You eat without tasting. Your mind is far away. A boy starts telling a riddle at the next table, his voice cracking with excitement. What walks on 4 legs at dawn, 2 at noon, and 3 at dusk? A woman yells, "That's a Roman riddle, not Norse." He grins. Still works, doesn't it? And it does. You glance around the hall one more time. The fire burns low. The seer is gone. The games are over. But there's a sense of something bigger hanging in the air. A connection, a community. A circle closed for now, but never fully broken. You're part of it. For this night, at least, you belong here. And as your eyes begin to drift shut again, you hear someone whisper, "Tomorrow we sail." And you wonder, will you go with them? You wake to cold air kissing your cheek and the unmistakable smell of damp wool. Morning, but not the kind you're used to. No alarm clocks, no blinking smartphone screens, just a heavy sky the color of forged iron and the slow sound of hooves crunching over frost-hardened earth. You're not in the Longhouse anymore. You're outside now, just beyond the feast hall. At some point in the night, your legs must have carried you out with the others. Or maybe you were carried. Hard to say. Your brain still feels like it's swimming in honey and ghost stories. Around you, the Vikings are stirring. But this isn't your typical brunch after-party scene. No one's whining about hangovers or frantically searching for lost cloaks. This is purposeful, quiet, focused. Because today is a thing day. You hear it in the whispers. The thing is starting. Not a thing, mind you. The thing. You shuffle along with the small crowd, following the scent of sea air and the low hum of anticipation. A few paces ahead, 2 boys are dragging a wooden stool between them. Behind you, a stooped old man is carrying a carved staff, muttering what you swear is a legal disclaimer in Old Norse. The thing you soon learn is no party. It's Viking democracy. Yes, really. You round a ridge and see it, a large open clearing, ringed by flat stones and uneven wooden posts. At the center stands a simple platform, rough boards nailed into place. No decoration except for a wolf's skull mounted on one side. A crowd is already forming. Warriors and farmers, old women and teenage girls, all standing side by side. No one tells you where to sit. No one makes announcements. The community just arranges itself. And then a man climbs the platform. He's not the Jarl, not a seer, just an elder with a beard that could probably hold small birds and a voice like gravel soaked in beer. He raises one hand, and the chatter dies. The thing begins. In Viking society, the thing was the local assembly, part courtroom, part town hall, part therapy session. It was where disputes were settled, laws decided, wrongs avenged, and the occasional outlaw sentenced to exile, or worse. This wasn't just talk it out, hug it out. The decisions made at the thing could mean life or death. A poorly handled insult might start a blood feud. A dishonored agreement could cost you your farm. And if you thought the Jarl always had the final say, nope, the thing could overrule him. Historians still argue whether the thing system leaned more toward oligarchy or grassroots democracy. But what's clear is this: Viking law wasn't some backroom scroll scribble. It lived and breathed out here, in the cold wind, with everyone watching. Your attention is drawn to the first speaker, a red-faced man pointing accusingly at another guy holding a sheep. The charge? Fence theft. Yes, someone allegedly stole a fence. Not the whole thing. Just part of it. The accused shrugs dramatically. It blew over in a storm. I was preserving it. There are gasps, snorts. Someone yells, "You don't preserve someone else's fence, you fence steal it." Then a woman stands. Not a warrior, not a noble. Just a mother with a squint and a big wool scarf. She speaks with calm authority. "He did the same to my sled. Said he was sheltering it from the rain." Boom. That's it. The elder bangs his staff. "You owe 2 goats and a new sled plank. Next." It's weirdly satisfying. Swift justice delivered publicly, with just enough sass. Case after case rolls in. One man accuses another of borrowing his comb for over a month. A young couple argues over whether their marriage contract included a fishing boat or just the nets. A boy is put on trial for feeding mushrooms to his sister's horse. Spoiler: the horse is fine, but now afraid of snow. You watch as the community debates, laughs, frowns, and eventually rules. Even kids pay attention. This is how they learn. Not from dusty books, but from watching fairness in action. And it's not all petty squabbles. One case hushes the crowd. A woman steps forward, clutching a bloodied cloth. She says her neighbor struck her son in the chest with a mallet. The accused steps forward too. He doesn't deny it, but he looks broken. His voice shakes. "I didn't see him there. I was working. I turned and he was just there. I swear by Thor, I didn't mean..." The elder nods slowly. He looks at the cloth, then at the boy, who's sitting nearby, pale but alert. A long silence. Then, instead of punishment, the elder proposes a vergild, a compensation payment. The man will offer labor for the family's farm until the boy recovers, and next season, he will teach the boy woodworking to heal what was harmed. A few murmurs, then slow nods. And you get chills, because this is justice, but it's also community repair. Accountability and compassion. Weirdly modern, really. Here's a fringe tidbit you didn't expect. Some Vikings held their things on islands, believing that crossing water to reach the legal site added symbolic weight, leaving behind personal baggage, entering neutral ground. A reset button, Viking style. And yes, sometimes things did end in violence. If someone refused to accept a verdict, or if tensions boiled over, the assembly could erupt. But today the thing is balanced, tense in places but fair. As the last case wraps up, a brawl over goat breeding rights, you feel the wind change. Literally. A sharp gust tears through the clearing, and everyone instinctively turns toward the ridge. The Jarl is there, not striding like a ruler, but walking like one of the people. Cloak snapping behind him, axe strapped to his belt. He nods to the elder, then steps onto the platform, and in a voice that needs no drum, he says, "Tomorrow, we raid." The energy changes instantly, not fearful, not bloodthirsty, just alert, focused, like a switch has flipped. You realize the thing isn't just about solving problems, it's about preparing for them, binding the group together before they face the world outside. The Jarl continues, "Those who sail with me, speak now. Those who stay, prepare the fields. We are one, wherever we stand." He raises a hand. No salute, no battle cry, just that quiet strength. And the crowd responds, not with shouts, but with hands raised in quiet assent. Even the old man with the bird beard lifts his staff. It's done. The thing is over. You walk away, heart still humming with the echo of those voices. The sea waits. The longships are being loaded. The next chapter is already whispering to the wind. But for now, you've just witnessed the Viking version of civic life. Messy, passionate, sharp-edged, but rooted in something deeply human. Not bad for a culture we tend to oversimplify as helmet-clad hooligans, huh? The next morning smells like pine tar, fish guts, and destiny. You blink awake under a cloudy sky and find yourself standing at the edge of a Viking harbor. The Longhouse and the Thing site are far behind now, just wooden silhouettes against the cold green hills. Here, everything is movement, purpose, clanging iron, barked orders, sails snapping in the sea wind, and ships, so many ships. Not the fat, clumsy kind bobbing in modern marinas, but sleek, vicious creatures of war. Longships. They stretch across the rocky shore like wooden wolves, lean and narrow, their carved dragon prows glaring at the horizon with snarling pride. And you, lucky you, are climbing aboard one of them. Careful now. These decks are narrow and slippery from the salt spray. You settle yourself between two crates of salted meat and what you hope is dry firewood. The plank beneath you creaks, alive with tension. This isn't just a boat. It's a floating heartbeat. You glance around at your crewmates. There's the grizzled warrior with tattoos that snake across his face like frost cracks in ice. The boy, no older than 15, still cradling his spear like it's made of glass. The red-haired woman with one eye and the calmest expression you've ever seen. No one's panicking. They've done this before. You're doing your best to look like a normal Viking. Spoiler, you don't. But no one mocks you. Everyone's too busy tying ropes, checking shields, murmuring to gods you've never dared to name. Because today, you sail to raid. Or to trade. Or to die. Possibly all three. The line between those outcomes is thinner than the blade strapped to the Jarl's waist. And speaking of him, he's already at the tiller, hand gripping the carved wooden handle, eyes fixed on the sea like it owes him money. He doesn't shout, doesn't need to. With a heave and a splash, the longship slides into the water like a knife through wool. You are officially afloat. And here's the wild part. You're not powered by sails. Not yet. First come the oars. Long, heavy, brutally simple. One per rower, and you're now a rower. Congrats. The rhythm is brutal but hypnotic. Dip, pull, dip, pull. The sea groans beneath you. Salt stings your lips. blisters blossom on your palms like unwanted roses. But you keep going, because everyone else is. This is not a cruise. This is Viking cardio. And guess what? You're not just rowing. You're navigating too. Everyone is, because there's no GPS. No glowing blue dot showing where you are. There's the stars, if they're visible. There's the birds, the waves, the shape of the coast, the taste of the wind. Oh, and the sunstone. Yup, here's your quirky fact of the day. Some Viking sagas mention a special crystal, probably Icelandic spar, that could see the sun even through clouds or fog, a kind of magical Viking GPS. Historians still debate if this was real science or poetic nonsense, but sailors did claim to use it. You don't get to try one, though. Sorry, you just get a blister. Hours pass, or maybe days. Time melts on the water. You eat hard bread. You drink sour ale. Someone tells a joke about Thor's thighs. Someone else pukes overboard. The sea starts talking. Not in words, of course, but in moods. 1 minute it's calm and glassy. The next it's kicking up waves like it's offended by your presence. You grip the gunwale and hold your breath. The ship rises, falls, rises again. The sail is finally hoisted. A rectangle of wool dyed with runes that flutter like secret messages to the gods. It snaps taut, and suddenly the ship flies. This question mark. This is speed. This is freedom. This is danger in every direction. You pass islands shaped like broken teeth, cliffs where birds scream from their nests. Occasionally, you spot another ship in the distance, maybe friend, maybe foe. The Vikings didn't wear uniforms. They didn't fly flags. Every ship was a gamble. The Jarl gives no sign of concern. His eyes are still on the horizon. And then, at last, land. Not home. Target. You pull in close to shore, paddling silently now. The oars are muffled with cloth. Voices are whispers. Every creak feels loud enough to wake the gods. You hop overboard and wade to land, cold water up to your waist, pebbles underfoot. Every nerve is screaming, but you move like the others do, swiftly, quietly, with intent. It's a small village. Maybe Saxon, maybe Celtic. Maybe they'll fight. Maybe they'll offer you bread. Viking raids weren't always about slaughter. Sometimes they were negotiated. Sometimes they were festivals of violence. Sometimes they were both. And here's the thing. This isn't just about gold. It's about status, fame, glory. Bringing home something worth singing about. A successful raid could make a nobody into a legend, or a ghost. There's a flash, metal in moonlight. A dog barks. Then chaos. You stay low. Watch as the warriors fan out. Some shout in foreign tongues. Some kick doors open. A pot shatters. Someone's yelling for their mother. You press yourself against a rock, heart hammering like a blacksmith's drum. This is not a video game. This is brutal, messy, loud. But it's also human, because alongside the violence, you see restraint. A warrior helps a crying woman to her feet. Another shields a child with his body, motioning for them to flee. This isn't mindless savagery. It's a system, rules within the madness. And suddenly you get it. The Vikings weren't just raiders. They were strategists. They picked their targets, knew their trade routes, timed their attacks with the tides and moon. They didn't just take, they calculated. Historians still argue whether Viking raids were spontaneous or planned months in advance. But one thing is clear, they weren't dumb brutes. They were opportunists with a sailor's brain and a predator's patience. Eventually, it ends. The Jarl calls everyone back. There are no cheers, just heavy breathing, quick inventories, a few wounds. One man limps, arm cradled against his chest. Another carries a stolen chest full of what sounds like coins. Back to the boats. You push off in silence. And as the longship slides back into the dark, you look over your shoulder at the smoking thatch roofs, the silent village, the retreating shoreline. You feel a tangle of things: guilt, power, awe, confusion. You can't explain it. You don't want to. You just sit, hands raw, body aching, soul buzzing. And the sea rocks you like a lullaby that forgot the words. By now, the sea has become your second skin. Salt crusts your hair. Your fingertips are permanently wrinkled. Every muscle feels strung tight like a bowstring, yet your senses are oddly calm, dulled by repetition, sharpened by routine. The raid is behind you, and so is the fear. The boat creaks under the weight of plunder and the quiet satisfaction of survival. You'd think there'd be shouting, celebration, at least one wildly inappropriate sea shanty. But no, just soft murmurs, the occasional joke about someone falling into a pig trough during the raid, and a few snores from the lucky ones who can sleep in motion. Because now it's time for something equally important in Viking culture: sharing the loot. You arrive at a small inlet tucked between jagged cliffs, a place so secretive and quiet it might as well be carved out of myth. This isn't the home port. This is a neutral camp, used only after raids, where things are counted, sorted, and, most importantly, divided. And let's be real, this part's not about gold. It's about trust. The Jarl steps forward, cloak still stained with sea salt and ash, and orders the unloading to begin. Out come the chests, the carved goods, the bundles of woven cloth, even a few chickens, loudly protesting their new life in Norse custody. Then come the rules. And yes, there are rules. Viking society wasn't just finders keepers. The division of spoils followed a strict, almost sacred code. The Jarl gets first choice, not because he's greedy, but because he led the raid. After that, the plunder trickles down according to rank, contribution, and sometimes sheer luck. You're handed a leather pouch with a handful of silver coins and what appears to be a Saxon belt buckle. Congratulations, you've officially been paid in the world's oldest freelance gig economy. But wait, it gets more dramatic. One man protests his share, claims he broke down 2 doors and took 3 hits to the face and deserves more. Another insists he killed the village headman himself and should get a carved horn. Arguments spark. The Jarl listens, doesn't raise his voice, just lets them talk until the air burns with tension. Then he turns to the runestone. Yes, the runestone, set upright near the fire. It's not for decoration. It's the camp's ledger. He places a hand on it and says, "All shares stand. Dispute again, and you row home alone." Oof, that shuts it down fast. And here's the fascinating historical detail. Vikings were obsessed with honor economics. Loot wasn't just about wealth. It was a metric of bravery, leadership, loyalty. A fair split proved the leader's competence. A messy one could start a mutiny or even a blood feud, which, let's be clear, did happen. Historians still argue whether blood feuds were part of a justice system or simply vendettas gone wild. But the truth is this: if you mess with a Viking's reputation or his silver, prepare to wake up to a very angry cousin with an axe. Anyway, tonight is not one of those nights. Once the last pouch is handed out, tension lifts like fog from the fjord. Someone uncorks a skin of mead. Someone else starts strumming a lyre made from a horse's jawbone and gut strings. Yes, that's a real thing. And yes, it sounds exactly as rustic as you'd imagine. You get a fire. You get roasted eel. You even get a game, knuckle bones, kind of like dice but made from sheep joints. Loser has to sing a saga verse with their mouth full of seaweed. And that, of course, is you. You sing. You choke. Everyone laughs. The night deepens. Shadows stretch. You lie back against a log and stare up at a sky that feels closer than usual, thick with stars that look like they've been hammered into the firmament. And that's when she sits down beside you. A skald. A poet. She looks unbothered by the cold, wrapped in a cloak of furs and mystery. Her voice is low, melodic. She doesn't ask if you want to hear a story. She simply starts. And you listen. Because when a skald speaks, you don't interrupt. She tells the tale of Egil Skallagrimsson, the warrior poet who once saved his own life by composing a praise poem for the very king who wanted him executed. That's not legend, it's in the sagas, and it worked. The poem was so good, the king let him live. Poetry equals power. You realize this culture runs deeper than ships and swords. It's about legacy, being remembered, whether through battle, through craft, or through verse. And that's your quirky fact for the night. Viking society, for all its violence and chaos, revered poets as highly as warriors. A good skald could make, or unmake, a hero. They were walking Twitter accounts with memory for centuries, and the ability to turn you into either a legend or a laughingstock. As the story ends, she presses a carved bone into your hand. "Don't lose this," she says. "It's got your name on it." Sort of. You look down. It's inscribed with runes. You can't read them, obviously. But the shape of them, it feels personal. You ask what it says. She shrugs. "That's for you to earn." And just like that, she disappears into the firelight. You sit for a long while, staring at that little bone like it's a key to something ancient inside you. Eventually, you sleep. The wind whistles over the rocks. The fire crackles. The sea murmurs somewhere just out of view. And you dream not of gold, or blood, or even home. You dream of a song, a saga written not yet in ink, but in footsteps, and sails, and second chances. You wake up cold, but not the forgot to pull the blanket over your feet kind of cold. The ancient glacial kind of cold that creeps into your teeth and sits there like it paid rent. You blink at the sky, bleary-eyed, expecting another fire, another breakfast of eel and sour bread, maybe even a continuation of the saga from the Skald. But the camp is gone. Not empty, just gone. Packed up with the efficiency of people who've done this 100 times. Fires out, boats loaded, warriors already stretching their arms like they're limbering up for a long day of rowing. The Jarl walks by, muttering something about tides. And you, once again, are late. You scramble aboard your now familiar longship, which groans like it knows what's coming. The sea doesn't care if you slept well. The wind doesn't care if your shoulder aches. You're moving again. But this time, you're not heading back. This time, you're heading north. You don't know it yet, but you're about to learn one of the most fascinating and rarely romanticized parts of Viking life: settlement. Sure, raiding makes the headlines. Swords, blood, loot. It's all very Hollywood. But when the glory is over and the gold's been spent, a deeper ambition kicks in. Land. You see, Vikings weren't just pillagers. They were homesteaders, farmers, colonizers. Whole families packed up their goats and hopes and set sail into the unknown to claim a patch of earth that no one could take from them. And now, apparently, you're tagging along. The coastline grows wilder the farther you sail. The trees look older, the hills steeper. Occasionally, you spot strange wooden markers carved into the rocks, landnam stakes, signaling someone has already claimed this area. Early Norse settlers marked their territory this way, literally stabbing the earth with ownership. Eventually, the ships pull into a narrow fjord. The water is so still it reflects the sky like a broken mirror. There are no villages here, no farms, just stone, moss, and silence. But the Jarl says this is the place, and just like that, you're a settler now. First job, build a shelter, not a fancy longhouse, yet. Just something to keep out the wind and wolves. You help dig turf, drag logs, and tie beams with sinew. It's backbreaking, and the tools are simple. You miss hammers that don't shatter in your hand. But something amazing happens. It works. By nightfall, there's a crude but solid shelter. There's a fire pit, and someone's already roasting something that smells like it might be edible. You're handed a slab of smoked seal meat on a plank of wood and told, "Eat fast or the foxes will." You're not even sure if it's a joke. The following days blur together. You fish, you dig, you learn to curse in Old Norse. A child hands you a chicken that bites your thumb. You help build a fish drying rack and learn with horror that fermented shark is a real thing and people eat it on purpose. But slowly, a community begins to form. Small fences, a wooden lookout tower, even a crude bathhouse, a reminder that Vikings were, fun fact, obsessed with cleanliness. They bathed once a week, which in medieval terms is downright luxurious, and many carried grooming kits with tweezers, combs, and ear scoops. That's your quirky tidbit of the day. Filthy barbarians? Not these guys. They'd call you out for your flaky scalp before you even finished your first tankard. And as this new village grows, something even stranger happens. You feel peaceful. The silence isn't threatening anymore. It's comforting. The wind in the grass sounds like someone humming. The fjord becomes a mirror where you watch yourself change, slowly, from tourist to participant. One night, there's a feast. Not a wild, drunken affair like back in the Jarl's Hall. This one's quieter. Earned. A celebration of surviving the first week without freezing or starving. You sit around a central fire. Someone passes a drinking horn carved with waves and birds. Someone else plays a jaw harp, its twangy rhythm oddly hypnotic. A girl carves runes into a plank of driftwood. You ask what she's writing. She shrugs. A list of things I'm afraid of. You ask why. She replies, so they can't surprise me. And wow, that hits deep. Because Vikings didn't conquer the sea out of arrogance. They did it out of necessity. Norway, Iceland, Greenland. They weren't exactly overflowing with farmland. To survive, you had to sail, to settle, to adapt. Even if it meant facing fears every day. Scholars still debate how much of Viking expansion was driven by overpopulation versus politics versus just plain curiosity. But to the people who lived it, like this girl with her rune list, it was about staying one step ahead of whatever monster was hiding in tomorrow. You go to bed that night with wind in your ears and her words in your chest. Tomorrow, you'll learn to shear sheep. Or that wolves got into the storehouse. Or that a neighboring group has set up camp a few miles east, and the Jarl wants to visit them. But for now, you sleep. And the land, still new and unfamiliar, holds you like an uncertain promise. You're starting to forget what day it is. There's no calendar carved into the turf walls, no bells ringing, no alarms chirping. The only clock here is the sun, and even that's starting to feel unreliable in this weird northern twilight, where the night never quite becomes night and day, just stretches. But today, finally, something different happens. A rider arrives. Yes, a rider, on an actual horse, and not just any horse, a stocky, shaggy-maned Icelandic pony that looks like it could headbutt a tree into submission. The man dismounts, adjusts his heavy cloak, and says something in clipped, official-sounding Norse. The Jarl stiffens. You feel it immediately. The air shifts. Conversation dies. The kids stop playing with sheep bones. Even the chickens go quiet, which frankly is its own miracle. The man has brought a message. There's going to be a thing. And no, that's not a typo. The thing, with a capital T, is an ancient Viking public assembly. A mashup of parliament, courtroom, and town hall meeting where free men gather to settle disputes, pass laws, and decide, well, everything. And you're going. You travel for 2 days, your little settlement joining with others along the way, until you're part of a caravan of carts, ponies, and shouting toddlers. It's like an open-air Norse music festival, but with more swords and fewer porta-potties. When you arrive, the scene is epic. Picture a vast meadow ringed by rocky hills, tents of every shape and size, smoke rising from dozens of campfires, children darting between booths selling carved amulets and dried fish, dogs barking, axes being traded like Pokemon cards. And in the center, the Law Rock. Yes, it's an actual rock, and it matters a lot. Because here, standing atop it, is the law speaker, the person tasked with reciting the law from memory, word for word. Imagine being your village's walking legal hard drive. And no, you can't consult notes. And here's a mainstream fact for the night. Iceland had one of the earliest functioning parliaments in the world, established around 930 CE, at a place called Thingvellir. And yes, that's spelled with a thorn, which is basically a medieval "thi," written like a cross between a pea and a pretzel. Anyway, back to the meadow. The Jarl leads your group into the assembly circle, where disputes are already heating up. A man accuses another of stealing sheep. Another argues about a boundary stone being moved. You even hear someone shout about a goat insult, apparently a major offense in these parts. But then comes a bigger case. Blood price. Turns out one man killed another during a drunken knife game. The family of the dead wants weregild, a compensation paid in silver, livestock, or land. The killer claims it was self-defense. The assembly listens, debates, and finally votes. And no, this isn't some shouting match. It's democracy. Viking style. You don't vote with ballots, but with your presence. You stand behind the speaker whose argument you support. The side with more freemen wins. In this case, the weregild is agreed upon. 30 ounces of silver, a goat, and the killer must recite a skaldic verse in honor of the dead man's bravery. That's your quirky tidbit. Vikings used poetry not just for fun or flattery, but as part of legal resolution. Think of it as mandatory eulogy meets community service. But the thing isn't just for justice. It's also about lawmaking. New rules are proposed, like tax on foreign traders and boundaries for a nearby forest. Someone suggests banning fermented walrus milk. You hope that's a joke? And someone else proposes stoning adulterers. You really hope that one doesn't pass. And here's where you really feel the weight of it. This isn't some chaotic free-for-all. It's order. In the heart of what most of the world thinks is a barbarian culture, you're watching the machinery of civilization grind forward, slow, flawed, deeply human, but undeniable. Historians still argue whether the thing was more symbolic than truly democratic, or whether women actually had much say in these assemblies. Some sagas mention women attending, even speaking. Others are silent. But here, in this imagined world, you see them, on the edges, leaning in, passing advice to their sons and husbands. Their presence matters, even if the law doesn't always say so. The next few days blur into a rhythm of debate, bargaining, and awkward communal bathing in nearby streams. You make friends with a craftsman who trades you a carved fishhook for your last scrap of smoked eel. You even meet a Christian monk from across the sea, sitting quietly under a tarp and writing with a quill, sketching what he sees with both fascination and fear. You ask why he's here. Curiosity, he says, and maybe survival. And that, in a way, sums up everyone's reason. The final day of the thing ends with a feast. Of course it does. This time, the meat is roasted over an open pit and served on flatbread, dripping with fat. There's mead, singing, even a wrestling match where the loser has to wear a sheep's skull for a hat. You volunteer. You lose. You wear it with pride. But beneath the jokes and the noise, you sense a deeper pride rippling through the crowd. Because here, in this remote northern world, people who once survived on plunder are now building systems, communities, a code. And that's when someone grabs your arm and says, "You've got to see this." They lead you away from the fire, up a short hill, to a circle of standing stones. At the center is a wooden post carved with dozens of runes. Names. It's a memorial. For those lost in battle, in childbirth, at sea, people no one wanted to forget. Their names carved so deeply into the wood you can trace them with your fingertips and almost feel their echoes. Someone has carved a new name just yesterday. A boy, 12 years old, fell through ice on the journey to the thing. You stand in silence and realize that while the stories of Vikings may be filled with storms and swords and dragons, the truth is much simpler. They loved, they mourned, they remembered, and now, so do you. You've been traveling again. The thing is over, the law has been spoken, and your little settlement has returned to its rhythm. But the Jarl, ever restless, has new ambitions. There's a rumor, whispers of a monastery to the west, isolated, rich, poorly defended. And while you've been growing accustomed to a more peaceful Viking life, chickens, turf houses, community rules and all, that undercurrent of Viking identity still flows, seafaring, raiding, proving oneself through daring. You're back on a long ship, the oars creaking in their sockets, the salt wind in your hair. It's almost comforting now. You know the rhythms. You've learned to tie proper knots, not just the panicked bundles you made weeks ago. You even have your own belt knife. You're becoming something else. The monastery appears just after sunrise, shrouded in mist, perched on a bluff above a quiet beach, stone-walled and silent. Its bell tower casts a long shadow. You can already picture it filled with golden goblets, wax candles, finely stitched cloth, maybe even a few jewel-studded relics. Or so everyone hopes. But this time, it's not a mindless charge up the shore. The Jarl has a plan. He orders scouts ahead. They watch the routines of the monks, when they ring the bell, where they gather firewood, how many guard dogs they have. 0, apparently. A boy with wild hair sketches the layout in the sand using a stick and a mussel shell. When the sun's at its highest, the Jarl gives the signal. You go in quiet. Stealth was never the romantic part of Viking raids, but it happened. Many attacks were strategic, often timed to religious festivals when defenses were lax. One monk later wrote that the Norse struck like wolves among lambs. You climb the hill, your feet silent on moss. At the edge of the cloister, the silence is almost deafening. A bird calls overhead, then the first scream. It all happens fast. Doors splinter, monks scatter. Some fall to their knees pleading in Latin, others run, robes flapping, bare feet slapping the stone. The Jarl's men move with terrifying precision. Chests are broken open, candlesticks seized. A chalice passed hand to hand like some sacred football. You freeze. You lock eyes with a monk, maybe your age. He's clutching a book, thick, leather-bound, ornate. You expect him to flee, but instead, he holds it tighter. You don't take it, and something in him relaxes. Later, that same book will be found hidden in a hollow under the floorboards. It will contain not just scripture, but sketches of Viking ships, drawn from memory by someone who saw them once and never forgot. That's your quirky tidbit. Monks didn't just fear Vikings, they documented them obsessively. Some even admired them, in secret margins of manuscripts. Ferocity had a kind of awe to it. But for now, the chaos ends. No one's killed. This was a soft raid, more about intimidation than blood. The Jarl wants word to spread. Fear is useful. And besides, gold is gold, silver plates, beeswax candles, bolts of rare silk. You even find a stash of dried figs, which somehow feel like the most luxurious item of all. And then, just like that, you're back at sea. This time, the mood is different. Victorious, yes, but also quieter. You sit next to a warrior with scars across his knuckles. He's sharpening his axe, not because he needs to, but because it's habit. He offers you a piece of flatbread and asks if you ever wonder what's next. You joke, "What, after stealing from monks?" He shrugs. After all of it, raiding, settling, feasting, what's it for? And you don't have an answer. Historians still argue whether the Viking raids were primarily economic, political, or cultural in motivation. Was it desperation, greed, pride, or just the thrill of conquest? Maybe all of it, maybe none. But this man, sitting beside you, seems less like a raider and more like a man who's starting to feel the weight of his story. That night, back at your settlement, the loot is laid out like an offering. There's feasting again, of course, and someone even tries to play a monk's bell like a musical instrument. It clangs awkwardly, but people cheer anyway. You sneak away early. Out to the edge of the fjord, where the stars scatter like broken glass over the water. The air smells like salt and wood smoke. You dip your feet into the freezing shallows and think about the monk, still clutching his book. And then you hear her, the girl with the rune plank. She's nearby, scratching something into the wood with a bone needle. You ask what she's adding. "New fear," she says. "Becoming someone I don't recognize." And yeah, that one lands. You've changed. Of course you have. Anyone would, living through what you've lived. But are you better, stronger, or just harder? You lie back in the grass and let the question hang in the sky above you. You wake to the smell of frost and smoke. It's one of those mornings where everything feels made of stone. The earth, the air, even your own spine as you try to stretch the stiffness from your bones. Somewhere nearby, someone is arguing with a goat. Loudly. You've been home for weeks now." After the raid on the monastery, the Jarl decided to lay low. The longship is beached, turned on its side for repairs. The loot has been divided. The silver is mostly gone, traded for horses, tools, and a particularly stubborn goose that now patrols the farm like a tiny, hissing warrior. Life, for the moment, is ordinary. And that's its own kind of strange. You chop wood, you mend nets, you help rebuild the smithy's roof after a fire turned it into an accidental skylight. It's quiet, yes, but not dull. There's always something to do in a Viking village, from fixing fences to chasing wolves away from the goats. One afternoon, a man returns from the eastern woods with news. He found something, not gold, not game, but bones, human ones, and not old. These were buried shallow, too recently for time to have softened them. No grave markers, no runestones, just a scrap of cloth and a broken blade nearby. You join the small group that returns to investigate. The Jarl leads, his face unreadable. Beside him walks the wise woman, the one everyone calls the Dream Finder. She says nothing, just runs her fingers through the soil and hums something low. There's debate. Who buried this body? Why? The Jarl suspects a feud, maybe a dishonorable killing, an ambush without witnesses. Someone whispers the word revenge, and suddenly the air is thick again, as if the clouds themselves are eavesdropping. This is where things take a turn, because the Jarl decides to hold a trial. And not just any trial, a holmgang. Yes, the Viking duel. Now, here's a mainstream fact. Holmgangs were a real legal practice, an accepted way to settle disputes, from land disagreements to accusations of murder. Combatants would fight on an agreed surface, sometimes an actual hide or cloak laid on the ground, until first blood, surrender, or death. And you're going to witness one. The accused is a man named Asmund, a big guy, quiet. He's never been especially friendly to you, but never cruel either. The accuser is a wiry younger man with a face like crumpled parchment and a personal stake. The buried man was his brother. You help construct the dueling circle, a rope laid out in the grass, marked with stones at each corner. The rules are announced. No arrows, no spears, just swords. First blood or death ends the fight. It's brutal, not flashy, not the choreographed chaos of movies. It's slow, tense, ugly. Grunts and mud and slipping feet. Asmund gets sliced across the arm, first blood, but doesn't stop. He knocks the other man to the ground and raises his sword, then lowers it. Silence. He throws the weapon aside and walks away. The crowd parts around him like smoke. Historians still argue whether holmgangs were more symbolic than lethal, or whether their decline came from changing values, Christianity, or sheer exhaustion with blood feuds. But in this moment, you feel the tradition straining, cracking at the edges. Later, the wise woman mutters to herself, "This land's tired of bleeding." That night, the village gathers to burn the uncovered body properly, this time with respect. There's no ship to launch, no great pyre, just a pile of wood and a whispered prayer in the old tongue. You don't know all the words, but you mouth them anyway. The next morning, life keeps moving. Asmund disappears. No one says where. The Jarl doesn't ask. You spend the next days helping the shepherds relocate the flock farther uphill. There's talk of wolves again. Always wolves. And you carry a spear now, though you still don't know if you'd actually use it. But something's shifted in you. You used to think the Vikings were all violence and plunder. And yes, you've seen both. But you've also seen restraint, judgment, mercy, doubt, things they don't paint on shields. And speaking of shields, yours is now hanging above the Firepit back at your Longhouse, not as a decoration, but as a reminder of what you've done, of what you've learned, of who you might still become. Winter doesn't arrive in a single storm. It creeps. First in the shortening days, then in the bite of morning air that lingers longer than it should, then in the sheep's wool growing thicker, and your neighbors stacking firewood like they're preparing for a siege. You've been in this Viking world long enough now that you can read the signs without needing anyone to explain them. The geese fly lower, the river runs slower, and everyone starts looking for things to repair, roofs, sleds, tempers. You, though, you're restless, because while winter brings stillness, it also brings stories. Nights grow longer, fires burn brighter, and voices fill the darkness with tales of the gods, of giants, of other worlds where time runs backward and wolves eat the sun. You find yourself listening more closely, not just to the tales, but to the way people tell them. There's a rhythm, a reverence, sometimes even a warning hidden under the words. Tonight is one of those nights. Everyone's gathered in the Longhouse, the smoke curling upward in lazy spirals. There's dried fish, root stew, and mead strong enough to melt your eyebrows. Children sit cross-legged near the hearth. The elders take turns speaking, and then someone says the name, Ragnarok. You've heard of it, of course. Even outside this world, the Norse apocalypse is famous. But this time, it's not myth, not theater. It feels like memory. They speak of a long winter, Fimble winter, 3 years of snow with no summer, of wolves devouring the moon and sun, of the Midgard serpent rising from the sea, of Odin falling, of Thor battling Jormungandr, of the sky catching fire and the world sinking. And yet, strangely, it doesn't end there. One woman leans in and whispers, and then a green world rises from the water. The gods return. 2 humans wake in the grass. That's your fringe tidbit. Despite all the doom and gloom, Ragnarok ends with rebirth. A world cleansed, a second chance. Maybe that's what holds everyone together during winter. That hope, nestled inside the destruction, like a flame cupped between cold hands. The next morning, you join a small hunting group heading into the forest. It's brutal out here. Snow up to your calves, ice that cracks under your boots like thin bones. You track deer for hours without finding a single hoof print. Eventually, someone suggests trying for smaller game. Hares, birds, anything edible. You're sent to check the traps, and that's when you find it. Not an animal. A man. Collapsed in the snow, half covered in frost. Alive. Barely. You wave wildly. Call the others. Together you drag him back to the settlement, where the healers strip away his soaked clothes and rub warmth into his limbs. He mutters something over and over. Storm. Lost. South. It takes days, but he recovers enough to tell his tale. He's from another village, far to the south. They were hit by a blizzard early, caught off guard. Supplies ran low. Some fled. Some didn't make it. He's not even sure how he ended up here. You offer him your last piece of smoked fish. He takes it with shaking hands. That's when the Jarl makes a decision that stuns everyone. Your village will help the others. Yes, help. Not raid. Not take. Give. Provisions are packed: grain, salted meat, even furs. The Jarl leads a convoy south, and you go with him. It's hard, cold work. But when you reach the struggling settlement, the faces that greet you are wide-eyed and stunned. You came to help? Someone whispers. And yeah, you did. Historians still argue whether Viking society was more violent than others of its time. But the truth is, complex. Feuds, yes, but also cooperation, kindness, shared firewood, warmth in dark seasons. What mattered was the bond of community, and sometimes that community extended beyond borders. When you return, it's already snowing. And this time, it feels welcome. The Longhouse is lit like a beacon. Music plays, low and steady, made from lyres and flutes carved from bone. There's a quiet joy in the air, like everyone's remembering they survived another turn of the wheel. You sit by the fire with the rune girl again. She's added something new to her plank, a pair of hands, open and empty. What does it mean? You ask. She shrugs. Not everything needs to be taken. You stay up long after the others sleep, watching the flames dance, listening to the logs sigh and shift, thinking about how far you've come, from the clumsy outsider in a borrowed tunic to someone who knows how to tie a net and warm a stranger's hands. You know the end of your time here is near, and though you don't yet know how the final days will unfold, you feel it in your bones. You've been changed, not by sword, not by fire, but by belonging. The sky has a weight to it today. Not a storm, not quite, just a heaviness. A sense that the clouds have leaned a little closer, as if listening, watching, waiting. You feel it too, because this is your last day. There's no grand farewell planned, no horn-blowing ceremony or solemn line of villagers bidding you goodbye. That's not how things work here. Endings happen quietly, the way snow melts or embers fade. You wake before dawn and slip outside. The frost hasn't yet cracked beneath the sun, and your breath hangs like mist in the air. You make your way through the sleeping village, past the Longhouse, past the frozen fields, past the goat who still doesn't like you. And you climb. It's a hill you've walked many times, but today it feels steeper. At the top is a flat stone, worn smooth by time, and from here you can see almost everything: the river winding through the trees, the smoke curling up from rooftops, the faint glimmer of the sea beyond. You sit there for a long time, thinking, letting the chill settle into your bones one last time. Then, a voice behind you. The rune girl. She sits beside you without speaking, just pulling her cloak tighter around her shoulders. When she finally does speak, it's soft. You won't remember everything, she says. That's how the world protects itself. You ask her what she means, but she just smiles and hands you something. It's the wooden plank, the one she's been carving all winter. You run your fingers over it, slowly. The waves, the longship, the flames, the wolf, the open hands, and now, one more carving. You. She's carved you, not as you were, but as they saw you. Tunic fluttering in the wind, spear in hand, looking forward. You were one of us, she says, even if only for a moment. And that, maybe, is the only goodbye you need. Back in the village, things are stirring. The blacksmith starts his fire. The children begin their morning arguments. The world goes on, just as it did before you arrived, just as it will after. But you're not quite the same. because you've seen what it means to be Viking. Not just the glory or the raids or the feast song fury. You've seen the frostbitten fingers feeding strangers, the tears beside the hearth, the duel cut short before a killing blow, the laughter in the face of night that never ends. And here, at the close of things, you realize it was never really about the longships or the swords. It was about belonging to the story. And now you do. You tuck the carved plank under your arm. One last breath of pine and smoke and sea salt wind. And then you turn, step into the fog, and the world lets you go. And now, the Longhouse is behind you. The fire is a memory. The cold has softened into comfort, and your heartbeat is no longer trying to be a war drum. You're lying back in your own bed now. Warm blanket, soft hum, eyes just barely open. The carved plank rests somewhere in your mind. The waves on it still move if you look close enough. The ship still sails, even if you're not watching. You've wandered through frost and flame, through honey halls and sword-flooded shores. You've worn wool and blood, eaten roasted boar and half-frozen bread, knelt by gods, and danced to stories older than empires. You've lived more in this one night than most do in many. And it's okay if the details blur now. That's what dreams are for. They file off the sharp edges and leave you with the feeling, the weight of a fur cloak on your shoulders, the hush of snow underfoot, the murmur of a rune whispered into your palm. You're safe now. The shield is hung. The feast is over. The sea has gone still. And whatever comes next, whether it's another world, another time, or simply the slow rise of morning, you'll carry this one with you. So close your eyes. Let the story fold around you like a wool blanket, and sleep like a Viking who came home. Sweet dreams.